The toy plane spun helplessly across the polished conference table before crashing onto the floor. Every executive in the room laughed. The billionaire CEO leaned back in his leather chair, watching the small plastic aircraft lying in pieces near the feet of a quiet maintenance worker. Then came the words that would change dozens of lives forever. "You couldn't even fix a toy plane." The room erupted with laughter again. But the worker calmly picked up the broken toy, studied it for a moment, and looked directly at the CEO. What he said next silenced every person in that room. "Then your 12 jets are finished. Before we begin, if you believe kindness matters more than status, and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire for more emotional and life-changing stories." The summer sun poured through the giant windows of Sneered Aviation headquarters, casting long golden beams across marble floors and glass walls. It was a day filled with celebration. The company had just signed the largest contract in its history. Executives wore expensive suits, photographers moved around capturing smiles, and reporters waited outside for interviews. Among the hundreds of employees working behind the scenes was a man named Rowan Mercer. Rowan wasn't an executive. He wasn't an engineer with a prestigious degree. He wasn't even listed in the company directory under any important title. For nearly 8 years, he worked as a maintenance technician in one of the remote hangars outside the city. Most people barely noticed him. His uniform was usually stained with grease. His hands carried small scars from years of repairing damaged machinery. His lunch breaks were spent alone beneath the wings of aircraft. But what nobody knew was that Rowan possessed something far more valuable than titles or expensive credentials. He understood machines. He understood them the way musicians understand melodies. The way artists understand colors. The way a father understands the emotions hidden behind his child's smile. Machines spoke to Rowan. Not with words, but through vibrations, sounds, tiny imperfections, and subtle movements most people never noticed. His gift had begun when he was a child. Growing up in a struggling household, Rowan never had expensive toys. Whenever something broke, replacing it wasn't an option. He learned to repair bicycles, radios, clocks, and eventually engines. His father, a mechanic who worked endless hours, used to tell him something important. People throw things away because they stop listening. That lesson stayed with Rowan for life. Years later, after his father's passing, Rowan carried those words into every repair he performed. Unfortunately, in the corporate world of Sneered Aviation, wisdom wasn't valued nearly as much as appearances. The CEO, Victor Hale, was known throughout the industry. He was brilliant, ambitious, and ruthless. Under his leadership, Sneered had become a multi-billion-dollar company. But success had changed him. He trusted numbers more than people. Profits more than loyalty. Titles more than talent. And because Rowan was simply a maintenance worker, Victor never once bothered learning his name. The incident happened during a company family day event. Employees had brought their children to headquarters. One little boy accidentally dropped his toy airplane in the executive conference room. The wing snapped off. The child began crying. While everyone stood awkwardly around, Rowan happened to be passing through. Seeing the boy upset, he knelt beside him and picked up the broken toy. Before he could repair it, Victor Hale noticed. Perhaps wanting to entertain his guests, perhaps wanting another opportunity to display his authority, the CEO smiled sarcastically. He tossed the toy toward Rowan and challenged him in front of everyone. The result was the moment that started everything. The broken toy slipped from Rowan's oily hands and fell again, splitting further. Laughter filled the room. Then came Victor's humiliating remark. "You couldn't even fix a toy plane." And then Rowan's unforgettable reply. "Then your 12 jets are finished." The laughter stopped instantly. A strange silence spread through the room. Victor's smile disappeared. Everyone stared. Rowan wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. His eyes remained fixed on the CEO. For a brief moment, uncertainty appeared across Victor's face. "What do you mean?" he demanded. Rowan calmly explained. For several weeks, he had been noticing unusual wear patterns on specific aircraft components. Small signs. Tiny warnings. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But enough to concern someone with his experience. He had submitted reports. Multiple reports. Each one ignored. Each one buried beneath layers of management bureaucracy. The affected aircraft included 12 passenger jets scheduled for major routes. If his suspicions were correct, those aircraft could soon face serious mechanical failures. Victor immediately dismissed the claim. After all, how could a maintenance worker know something the company's engineers had supposedly missed? Yet the confidence in Rowan's voice unsettled him. An emergency inspection was ordered. Not because Victor trusted Rowan. Because he wanted to prove him wrong. The inspections began that afternoon. By evening, concern spread through engineering departments. By midnight, panic had arrived. Rowan had been right. Not partially right. Completely right. The issue involved microscopic stress fractures developing within critical assemblies. The damage was nearly invisible during standard checks. But over time, the fractures would expand. The consequences could have been catastrophic. 12 jets were immediately grounded. Flights were cancelled. Executives worked through the night. Millions of dollars hung in the balance. Yet one terrifying realization overshadowed everything else. If the problem had gone unnoticed much longer, hundreds of passengers could have been placed at risk. The next morning, Victor Hale sat alone in his office. For the first time in years, he couldn't focus on profits. He couldn't focus on contracts. He couldn't focus on growth. He kept replaying the previous day's humiliation. Not his own. Rowan's. A man he had mocked publicly. A man whose warnings had been ignored. A man who may have saved countless lives. Meanwhile, Rowan returned to work exactly as he always had. He repaired equipment. Checked systems. Filled out reports. He sought no recognition. No attention. No revenge. That was what surprised everyone most. In a world obsessed with proving people wrong, Rowan seemed interested only in doing what was right. As news of the inspection spread through the company, employees began sharing stories. Stories Victor had never heard. How Rowan often stayed late helping younger technicians. How he quietly repaired coworkers' cars without charging money. How he once spent an entire weekend helping a single mother fix heating equipment before winter. How he remembered everyone's names despite most people forgetting his. The more Victor learned, the more uncomfortable he became. He had spent years building a successful company. Yet somehow he had failed to see one of its most valuable people. Several days later, Victor made an unexpected decision. Instead of holding another executive meeting, he traveled to the remote hangar where Rowan worked. The sight shocked him. The facility was outdated. Tools were worn. Equipment needed replacement. Employees worked hard but received little recognition. Victor walked through the hangar observing everything he had overlooked for years. Then he found Rowan kneeling beside an aircraft engine. For several moments, neither man spoke. The giant hangar echoed with distant machinery and sunlight streamed through open doors. Finally, Victor apologized. Not as a CEO. Not as a billionaire. But as a human being. It was perhaps the most difficult thing he had done in years. Rowan listened quietly. Then he said something Victor would never forget. He explained that every machine in the world eventually develops problems. Every aircraft. Every engine. every system. The same was true for people. The difference was that machines give warning signs before failure. People do too. The tragedy is that most of us ignore both. Victor stood silently absorbing those words. For the first time, he understood the deeper issue. The grounded jets weren't the real problem. The real problem was a culture where valuable voices went unheard. Over the following months, Sneered Aviation transformed. Maintenance reports received direct executive review. Employees at every level gained opportunities to share concerns. Training programs expanded. Safety procedures improved. New equipment arrived at neglected facilities. Most importantly, respect became more important than hierarchy. And at the center of that transformation stood Rowan Mercer. Not because he demanded power. Because he earned trust. Years later, employees still told the story of the toy airplane. Not because of the dramatic confrontation. But because it reminded everyone of a simple truth. Greatness often hides beneath ordinary uniforms. Wisdom doesn't always sit in executive offices. And sometimes the person capable of saving an entire company is the same person nobody notices walking through the door. As for Victor Hale, he never forgot that day. The broken toy airplane remained on a shelf in his office. Not repaired. Not polished. Exactly as it had fallen. A permanent reminder of arrogance, humility, and second chances. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire. Your support helps these powerful stories reach more people who need hope and encouragement. Special request: comment below with the words, "I will listen before I judge," if you believe every person deserves to be heard regardless of their title or position. On a bright afternoon many years later, Rowan was invited to speak before hundreds of new employees joining Sneered Aviation. Most expected a technical presentation about aircraft maintenance. Instead, Rowan told them about his father. The mechanic who had taught him that people throw things away because they stop listening. Then he looked across the audience and saw technicians, janitors, receptionists, engineers, managers, and executives sitting together. And he smiled. Because the lesson had finally been learned. The strongest companies are not built by the loudest voices. They are built by people who listen. The safest aircraft are not protected by pride. They are protected by humility. And the greatest leaders are not the ones who stand above everyone else. They are the ones willing to kneel down, pick up a broken toy plane, and recognize the value in the person holding it. That day, as sunlight poured through the hangar doors and reflected across the wings of aircraft waiting for their next journey, Rowan realized something beautiful. His father had been right all along. Machines speak. People speak. Hearts speak. The question is whether we are willing to listen before it's too late. And sometimes, listening can save far more than a company. Sometimes, it can save lives.